Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's about 1:17 right now. And, typically when we see a major case proceed through federal court, of all courts, you kind of think it's all said and done when you get a verdict and a conviction is reached here. But two here in Chicago surrounding street gangs are getting a do-over. And it has a lot of people kind of sitting up like, okay, how did this happen? Accused Four Corners hustler Chief LeBar Spann and the Wicked Town leader Donald Lee, years after their original convictions, are going to be back in court. There are claims that prosecutors made undisclosed promises for testimony against three men, they would be included there, tied to 11 murders. I want to bring in Ross Rice. He's a former FBI special agent to talk a little bit more about what's going on here, because there are so many question marks on this case, and maybe if there are others that may present just like it. Ross, thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I know that a lot of this played out for quite some time. I believe that at least one of these cases was 4 months in court, but is it the undisclosed promises in and of itself that rises to the occasion of having a retrial?
That appears to be the case, especially with LeBar Spann, who was the alleged leader of the Four Corners hustlers. He was charged in a federal grand jury indictment that was returned in 2019, along with 8 co-defendants, with racketeering and several other federal crimes, I believe Hobbs Act extortion and illegal drug dealing on the west and southwest side of Chicago. Over the next 3 years or so, 8 of the defendants pled guilty. Spann was the only one to go to trial. And as you mentioned, after a 4-week, I believe it was a 4-week trial, maybe it was 4 months, it might have been longer, but after a fairly lengthy jury trial in federal court, he was found guilty of all the charges. He was up for sentencing, and allegations surfaced that one of the witnesses against him, a former member of the gang named Sammy Booker, had been given a promise of assistance by one of the federal prosecutors. Booker was serving a 25 to 35-year sentence for a murder committed at the behest of Spann. And in order to get him to testify before a grand jury, it's alleged that this prosecutor said, I'll go to bat for you, I'll talk to the state's attorney's office and try and get your sentence down to 25. Well, that's all fine. You can make deals with defendants. That happens all the time. But the issue here is that was never disclosed. It wasn't disclosed to the grand jury, and it wasn't disclosed to the defense at trial. And that would be an issue that would go to the credibility of the witness, Booker. And the judge felt it was a serious enough allegation that he ordered a retrial of the case, which I believe starts today.
Yeah, and then, it seems like it took years for it to come out that this hadn't been disclosed. Maybe in a sentencing hearing, it seems like, of some sort. I was kind of trying to read through what I could. So what do you make of that aspect of it, that it took so long for us to even realize, oh, there was this one piece of it that seems to be crucial at this point that was undisclosed?
Yeah, I can't speak to the delay. None of the court filings that have been made public really address that. But if you look at the case, it was indicted in 2019. It had been investigated. It was alleged that this criminal enterprise was ongoing since 1990. And it took 3 years for the one defendant to go to trial. So delays and postponements are not unusual in court cases, especially federal court cases, when the goal is to get it right. And apparently Judge Durkin, who was the presiding judge here, felt that this was a serious enough matter that he needed to take the really unprecedented step of ordering a retrial.
Now, when you talk about a serious step, the Trump administration has called for the death penalty. And instead of the life prison sentences, I guess, that were originally in this case, prosecutors seem not to be seeking that. But do you think that we could see a different outcome from a retrial here?
Well, that's always possible. If the defendant elects to have a jury trial, he'll be judged by 12 members of the community that hopefully know nothing about him or the case. They will hear the evidence, and the one key factor I think that might change is when Booker testifies again, assuming he does, that this additional promise of assistance becomes known to the jury, and if it is it significant enough to taint his credibility as a witness. Personally, I don't think it'll be that big a difference, but who knows? Anything can happen with a jury trial.
Yeah. What do you think this does to a family? Obviously, street gangs are nothing new for Chicago, and they have terrorized neighborhoods for decades. And so if a family is waiting so long for some aspect of justice, and they think that they got it, and now you have to relive all of this all over again, talk about that aspect of things.
Well, it's a great point. And in the indictment, it was alleged that Spahn and some of his co-defendants were responsible for the murder of 6 individuals in connection with their gang operations. And these were people that were killed who were either competitors of theirs or people who owed money to the gang and weren't going to pay. And it was violence and threats of violence that's alleged in the indictment to be one of the key factors that the gang used to maintain discipline and control. So you're right. You have 6 families that are awaiting justice. They thought that justice was served when he was convicted in 2021. But here we are 4 years later, and they're going to have to relive, presumably, all of the testimony, all of the witness evidence regarding to the death of their loved ones. So it will be a very difficult and traumatic experience for all families, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I just, think about entire communities too that will look at this and say, well, I mean, what good was it if we've got to go back through all of this all over again? Even though, you want things buttoned up in the end if it's going to stick, but how are witnesses protected when you go back through this? And what if some of them have died? I mean, we're dealing with a gang-related story here, a gang-related case. Maybe someone hasn't made it 3-4 years down the road to go back through another trial as a witness.
Well, that's another great point. I don't know how many witnesses testified at the original trial. I don't know how many of them are still alive. I don't know how many of them are going to be willing to testify a second time. It's going to be a very difficult trial for the prosecution to undertake, but obviously it appears they're going forward with it. They feel that they have sufficient evidence to secure a conviction once again. Obviously, they did that 3 years ago at the first trial. And I think the only real issue here is going to relate to the testimony of Sammy Booker and whether the existence of this previously undisclosed bit of assistance offered to him in his state case is going to significantly taint his credibility as a witness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you say to people who question delayed accountability or whether accountability will happen at all?
Well, I think the saying you're referring to is justice delayed is justice denied, and that's certainly true in this case. But I think it's more important to get a conviction that is based on facts, is based on evidence that will withstand the scrutiny of an appeal. Unfortunately, as you know, in Illinois, especially in the state system, we have a very sordid history of people being unjustly convicted and sentenced and imprisoned for long periods of time. The federal system is a little slower in the process. There aren't as many cases, so they have the time to really look at the facts, look at the evidence, and make sure that if someone is found guilty of a crime, they truly are.
Yeah. If you ask people about culture shifts between these gangs from the 90s versus what's happening now, they immediately point to so many of these bosses from the 90s being locked up for long periods of time. Do you see that shifting over time?
Oh, that's a great point again, and that's exactly what happened. I think we call that unintended consequences. In the 80s and 90s, the federal government, the FBI, DEA, they put together a number of task force with local law enforcement to target these gang activities, the gang leaders that were in and around the Chicago area. And they were very successful in getting convictions But what happened is the underlings were still there, or new members joined. There wasn't the organizational structure, there wasn't the discipline. There's many fractions of different gangs that have gone off in different directions. And I think that's one of the reasons that there is so much gang-related violence in Chicago today. There's a lack of control and structure.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people talk about that. Ross, we always appreciate your input on these and your expertise. Thank you for sharing it yet again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, yeah, we'll see what happens with this case. We'll be following it very closely. I believe Tia Ewing is on this story, so we'll see what she has later today.